at really the idea of conflicts. This is a five-part series. Tonight is part 3. 2 weeks ago, which was part 1, we looked at being a people pleaser and just a bad rut that a lot of times believers fall into. Normally I have to say, can I get an amen? Come on, Lauren, get with me. I'm just kidding. And then last week we were looking at the idea of being offended. And then this week we're going to look with dealing with differences. Psychology has this crazy theory that children are basically empty vessels when they're born. I mean, to me this sounds completely ridiculous. I think sometimes in psychology there's people who get a bunch of degrees and sit behind an office desk and they just come up with a bunch of stuff and like they have no actual real world application, so then they write all these theories and stuff, and then everybody just says, hey, that sounds like a good idea, let's all go with it. And I'm fairly convinced that some of them just need to go out and get a job and actually get to know people. I hope I'm not offending anybody who's into psychology or anything, but there's basically 2 wings of psychology. There's like this, well, there 3, I guess. There's like the mystical one that's not really much of any scientific help. Then there's like the extremely, I guess you would call it liberal psychology. It doesn't really take facts into consideration. It just kind of what people want to believe, and then like they pass it off as like science, if it's more like pseudoscience. And then there's actual psychology, which can be great benefit to help us understand how people work, why people work, that kind of stuff. But in the liberal branch of psychology, there's this completely unfounded theory that children are just born as empty vessels. And what you do creates their character. So basically, they are nothing. And then as they interact, their character develops as a series of reactions to the environment. I mean, once again, these are things that kind of sound good if you just, don't really think too hard about it. But so then the idea of right and wrong, people having a conscience, that's not really a thing. Sin isn't really sin, it's just your upbringing. So you can obviously see how this is more of a theological statement than a psychological one. You're more trying to assert something about God and his nature or the lack of God, more so than you're actually trying to find out about how the brain works. So anyone who has kids know that they are born with their own characters. They're just their own little monsters. And that's just how they are. I mean, you can be the world's best parent and have a terrible kid. You can be the world's worst parent and be the world's worst parent and have the best kid. I mean, really, honestly, kids make their own decisions. You're going to find that out eventually. And some parents, in the pursuit of trying to be the perfect parent with the perfect kids, try and micromanage their kids, and it just doesn't really work. I mean, they just get to this point where they realize that they're actually a person. And once they realize that they're really a person, it all goes downhill. They're going to start having their own ideas and reading and, just kidding. I'm just joking. But anyways, so, they do have their own character, which change less the older you get. And the older you get, the more you get kind of rigid in your character and who you are. And you really have to work harder and harder the older you get to continue to grow and to change. I mean, when you're in college, think of it, for instance, you go and everything the professors say, you just soak it up. You're like, man, oh man, these guys are geniuses. My parents were idiots. And then you get to be about like 30-ish, and you're like, those professors were kind of dumb. My parents kind of understood things. And then you start to get old, and you're like, man, oh man, I don't want to change. This is the way I've always done it. There's no reason. It was good enough for my mom and my dad. It's good enough for me. And there's just kind of this stubbornness that comes. And they've actually, oddly enough, real science has actually proven this. As your brain as you get older, your brain becomes less fluid, becomes more rigid. That's a medical fact, actually. Yeah. And so it's not just something where, I think it's harder to change. No, it actually is harder to change when you get older. It's something that you have to constantly fight. And everybody is different. And, what makes one happy will make the other one mad. It's just an ongoing battle of People being different. That's really what family conflicts usually derive from. People being different. You know what I mean? Sometimes it'll start out as something that isn't a moral issue, and then because the little things were made into big issues, it becomes moral issues. Like, for instance, you're not going to listen to that music. You're not going to dress like that. Well, while you're in this house, and they're picking fights about things that don't really matter. You know what I mean? Like, I can't think of anything right now. Okay, here's one. Your son wears his pants a little bit too baggy. So rather than just picking your fights, you're not going to dress that way in my house. And it's good to teach your kids when they're toddlers how to dress. But when they start to get to the point of dressing themselves and choosing for themselves, there's not much you can do. I'm not saying that you should have a completely lawless house, but I'm saying you should probably pick your battles and say, okay, this one just is not worth the fight. Do I want to really go into a full-on fight with somebody just because they're doing something that irritates me personally, rather than something that's a moral issue? You get what I'm saying? So now that we kind of understand that, let's push forward to how does this apply to church conflict? How does this apply to church conflict? And I will say the exact same thing that I just said about family conflict is true about church conflict. Usually it's just two different people. Oh, I don't like them. It's just your character is rubbing raw on their character. It's not anything wrong with them. There's nothing wrong with you. It's just two different people. And the problem is we start getting our pride all wrapped up in it, and we say, no, I am right, and they are wrong. And so now we start building up a bridge to try and prove how stupid they are. And we start trying to get other people in the church to join our faction. This is this is the way we do things. Okay, you can do that, I guess. And so we are all still different. So most conflicts are caused from different people acting differently. That's kind of just the simple fact of it. It's okay to be different, and yet we have this idea in us that it's not okay to be different. We all have to be the same. Your first instinct is to get your point heard and win the argument. Somebody says something, somebody does something, well, I need to be heard. I've got to set them straight. They've got to have my point of view. I've got to, charge in there like a bull going after the red flag. And I got to win the argument. I've got to prove them wrong. I've got to silence the rebuttals. I got to put it into the grave and prove that I am the alpha Christian. They are the beta Christian. And it just gets to be this kind of unhelpful back and forth. Christianity is supposed to be different people helping one another. And sometimes I feel like in a lot of our conflicts, we're trying to make people just like us and just go to war with people for no reason. And so with that being said, it's important as you're trying to navigate the different problems you're going to face in churches, wait on God's timing first off. Don't always think, my way, my timing. Get out of that mindset. That's just a terrible mindset to have. And then admit the possibility that what you believe could be wrong. What you believe could be wrong. Remember what we talked about last week. Just because something offends you doesn't mean it's not. Doesn't mean it is a moral thing. Remember that. It's kind of something that's I've been learning over and over again. Before someone will listen to you, though, this is kind of important. They have to believe that you fully understand and empathize with them. I've seen a lot of people try to give people counseling, and it does not go well. Because what we do when somebody comes to us for counseling, typically, let me lay down the typical scenario. They come in. They lay out the problem. You give them the solution as fast as you can. Let's get this puppy rolling. This is what you're obviously doing wrong. Did you know that doesn't work with counseling? Does not work with counseling. People typically in counseling, you can't even start to even approach a resolution until you've had like 4 or 5 sessions. And even then, the goal is not to, and this is something that I've learned and actually very much value this advice. Actually, Pastor and I were just talking about this. The trick is to try and get them to come up with the solution themselves. That's the difficult part. Because in psychology, if you tell somebody how to fix their problem, even if it's the obvious solution, you are now accountable. Which means that if they don't follow it through, and then they'll blame it on you, and there's just this whole problem that bad news bears. So they have to believe that you fully understand and empathize with them, even if you don't agree. You know how hard it is to listen to somebody talk when the whole time you're thinking you're stupid? Everything you're saying right now is just stupid. Just, no, that's not true. Any of that stuff that you just said is just wrong. Well, obviously, if you have that idea, you're probably not going to be able to actually counsel the person, which is kind of important. And you might say, why are you even talking about counseling? Well, because as Christians, we counsel one another, right? I mean, that's something that Christians do, or at least we're supposed to. We're supposed to be there for one another, lift each other up. Well, unfortunately, a lot of times, our lifting each other up just resorts to spreading bad theology. And but we've talked about that enough. So let's look at Romans 12:15. I think so. People won't listen until they've been heard. That's just a typical thing. That applies to teenagers too. That's just a human principle. If you want somebody to hear you, you really have to hear them, which I think might be one of the big problems with Facebook. Maybe, I don't know. Bunch of people yelling at each other, calling people names. I don't know why it's not working. Romans 12:15, be happy with those who are happy and weep with those who weep. Be available with one another. So in order to move forward, you have to build rapport with the person that you're talking to, hopefully not about. And it's very important that as Christians, you don't have an alternative motive. Don't go to somebody with the idea of this: I can fix all your problems. I've taken a psychology class. I can fix all your problems. There's a certain arrogance that we get as humans. I'm the fixer. I can fix the problem. So I'm going to come in and I'm just going to fix it. I'm just going to fix everything. And that's a very naive view, unrealistic. I could go on. And another thing that we do is we kind of assume the conclusion, or we rush it. Like they're trying to talk and we've already kind of resolved the issue even though they're not even done talking. You know what I'm talking about? Where like somebody's talking and you're like, okay, can you quit talking so I can tell you how to fix your life? I mean, I already had this solved like 2 sentences ago. You didn't have to give me the whole essay. Come on. And there's kind of, I'm trying to be gentle about how I'm approaching this. What oftentimes happens, and this is something that happens with all of us, is we hear something. 2 people are having a fight, okay? It doesn't matter who. And we hear one side of it, and we say, I know the solution to this problem, right? Because we've heard the side that, mattered. What about the other side of the argument? See what I mean? So we've already decided the conclusion of this. Or a lot of times we'll get in a fight with somebody, and we will come to the conclusion of, this is why they're mad, this is why we're fighting. No talking, no dialogue, no questions, no back and forth, nothing. Just kind of, I know exactly why we got in a fight. Romans 12:9-10 says, love must be sincere. Hate what is evil, cling to what is good, be devoted to one another in love. Honor one another above yourselves. I think there's one more slide. Nope, there's not. So that idea of be devoted to one another. Be devoted to one another. Oh, well, they're lost. Moving on. They're an idiot. Moving on. That's not really being devoted to one another. And so some things that might help. Ask questions. Help them come to the solution themselves. Listen so as to hear. Listen so as to hear rather than answer. When you're listening to somebody, actually listen so as to hear what they're saying, so you can understand. Ask questions. When we were kids, we were told, don't ask a bunch of questions. Well, that's stupid. Now that you're an adult, you need to be asking a lot of questions. Ask questions. Learn. Always be able to change your opinion on something. So love them more than your opinion. That's going to be a little bit difficult to say. Yeah. And then lastly, be available and pray for them. a lot of times we like to give input. There was one situation that still slightly irritates me. There was a teenager that was coming to, it wasn't here, it was at a different church, but this same scenario could happen anywhere. There was a teenager that was going to this church, and there was this older guy that, actually I think it was a girl, it's been a long time. I think it was a girl. There was an older lady that was going to this church too. And, without getting to know the girl, without even being interested in her, she went up to her and had like this whole list of things that this teenage girl needed to change, and how she had to act differently, and how she needed to do this and do this and do this. And I was just thinking, you probably could have gotten her to listen to you if you were her friend, but if you were her friend, you probably wouldn't have come to her with that list. So it's kind of I don't know if that's technically a catch-21, but whatever. Sometimes I think that our pride just gets us into a lot of trouble. There's the pride of youth and the pride of age. And I think they're both pretty destructive a lot of times. The pride of youth says this: I'll make my own way. I don't need your help. I can do it myself. That worked for you back in the day, but this is a new day. I need to find my own path. I can't learn anything from you because you're old and outdated. The pride of youth. When you think that you know everything, you think that you can conquer the world. Well, then there's an equally destructive pride, the pride of age. I've seen it all. I know it all. I don't need to learn. I don't need to adapt. I can just keep doing the same thing I've always done, and everybody else needs to just get around me or get lost. I don't need the young, and they need me. The pride of age. Both prides are harmful and destructive. The question is, what are you going to do with the pride that rests in your heart? Often people won't come to you for advice or guidance because they will believe that you are too different. You're too different from them, and they don't feel comfortable. And sometimes that's true. Sometimes it's not true. Sometimes it's just insecurity. Sometimes it is true. I know a lot of times, take for instance this one church I was going to, and everybody, you were not welcome in the building. And I do mean welcome in the building if you didn't have a tie on if you were a guy. Yeah. And you women, you better not have cut hair. Oh, you better not have cut your hair. We're talking about wrath of God here. Bad situations. And, there's some places that when you go in with a mask on, they'll literally turn you away at the door and they'll say, no, you can't come in here, right? Everybody knows this, right? Exact same thing with the tie situation. They see you at the door, cut you off until you go back out. I've been in a lot of different churches, and, I get what they were trying to go for. Be respectful, respect God. I get that. I get that. But see, when your quote-unquote respect for God creates laws that only you can follow, and then your respect for God means trampling on other people, it's not really respect for God anymore. Because if you respected God, you would love people. Well, you need to respect the building. This building means nothing. This is where God lives. The New Testament is clear on that. The temple was destroyed. Our hearts are now the temple of the Holy Spirit. See what I mean? There's just this regression that we get to where it's my way or the highway. And I'm not just picking on one group. I'm saying we all are guilty of this. We have different opinions, different ideas. And the unfortunate thing is when we allow the differences that make us unique become a chasm that can't be crossed. And then even when people try and meet us in the middle, we tear down the bridge. I'm not budging. This is the way I see it. This is the way we're doing it. So there's three, how do I want to say this? There are three major differences that you will face in others that will irritate you. They will. Okay, let me break these down. Because oftentimes we just don't think about things. We know that something bothers us, but we don't actually ever stop to say, why is this bothering me? So there's three major issues. Okay, the first one is a difference of character. This would be like, I'm not outspoken. I'm a kind of a quiet person. So you, being a people person, irritates me. And all the introverts in the room are saying, yeah, they're those extroverts, man. Oof. Satan's play toys. And all the extroverts are saying, God wants you to get out of your house, introverts. And, obviously right there, you see the difference of character. Difference of character. Some people are just, I would do almost anything to avoid a phone call. Almost anything. I mean, I imagine I would sell, you know what? No, not imagine. I'm saying it. I would sell my legs to not have to have phone calls ever again. If there was if you sell your legs, you will never have to answer a phone, I would do it. I would do it. I hate being on the phone. And so I've been talking with the government this week, and they're all like, okay, we need to have a phone interview. And I'm like, no, can't we have a text interview? Text me, message me, email me, write me a letter. I mean, I'll pay for expedited shipping. Just please don't do this to me. Oh my goodness. But then the second major difference you're going to have with people that are going to rub you raw is differences of preference. So this would be like politics, nationalism, music preferences, pet preferences, which is better, a dog or a cat. See what I mean? Protests and voting and all these different things, differences of opinion. Differences of preference. So if you've noticed, the grand majority of Facebook arguments, for instance, are going to be one of these first two. In fact, in most circumstances, it's going to be that second one. Difference of preference. Well, this person is who I'm voting for. Well, you're an idiot. That's this person. Or, global warming this. Well, that's not even real. And, then the back and forth. And both are often turned into an excuse for fighting. Preference and character, they're both oftentimes turned into an excuse for fighting, as if we needed any more reasons to fight, right? By giving them more value than they actually have. We become very self-centered and egotistical, narcissistic, and we can't fathom the idea that maybe your opinion about something might not matter. See, we think our opinion matters about everything because, like I said, we're egotistical. So then the third major difference you're going to face is a difference in morality. Now, of the three, this is the only one that even matters. A difference of morality. Like, I'll give you a couple examples here. Gossip. That's bad, okay? Lying, that's bad, okay? Whether we need Jesus and why, that's probably something that needs to be addressed. See, I think sometimes forgotten who really matters when we're trying to resolve conflicts with other people. And sometimes I think that we go into a conflict not trying to solve it. We go into it trying to fight. You know what I mean? Like, well, we have our boxing gloves on. It's like, oh yeah, I've come to the negotiations with Cheech and Chong. And it's just not really, we haven't come there to talk. And, then somewhere along the lines, as we start airing our opinions and are unable to listen to other people, we get kind of hypocrisy in our morals. You know what I mean? Like we say, this is my instead of following God's standard of what's right and wrong, here's my standard of right and wrong. And I'm going to hold you to it. It's wrong to cheat. You should never cheat on your wife. But it's okay to look at porn. What? Something I heard very frequently over the past couple weeks, about the Black Lives Matter. I'm not even going to comment on that, okay? So, not doing that. But what I will say is, one of the main organizations that was involved in this was advocating aborting black babies. So abortion is okay where you are slaughtering children, but then some Black Lives Matter? Well, if you're going to say Black Lives Matter, then all of them should matter. See what I mean? Hypocrisy in morals. Well, this is my view, and I'm not willing to budge on even what science says. You hear people say, love is love in sexual relationships that I want, but then this person's sexual relationship is wrong. Maybe we ought to embrace the idea that love is love that doesn't really apply in life, in the real world. I mean, if there's any standard, then that means there is a standard. See what I mean? Like, you can't say, oh, love is love because I'm okay with this sexual relationship, but then I'm not okay with child molestation. Well, you can't draw an imaginary line there. Either love is love or love is not love. See what I mean? There's certain amounts of hypocrisy that we allow in our morals when we are unwilling to ponder the idea that we might be wrong about something. Because I don't want that, that's wrong. And because I do want that, that's right. And what's made this really a lot harder is the invention of social media. Our interactions with people has become very surface, not very deep. And so we come up with our ideas, and then we start saying stuff like this. If you're not working towards a solution, you're part of the problem. You know, we start labeling people and start putting them all in these boxes, these nice, orderly boxes. Racist, not racist. Idiot, not an idiot. See what I mean? We have all these nice little ways of labeling people. I don't think that the church should operate like that. I really think that as Christians, especially in the midst of this chaotic time we're in, we have a calling to make peace in these very chaotic times. It's our job to go into a situation to bring healing, not to go in trying to get our point across, not to go in trying to, argue with someone who's already decided that they're not going to listen to you. I mean, if you're mumbling behind your keyboard saying this guy's an idiot, chances are they're mumbling behind their keyboard saying this guy's an idiot. I mean, right? As Christians, we can't be so concerned with arguments and stupid stuff like that. We have to be there to show people Jesus. And you have to ask yourself, would Jesus be arguing about stupid stuff? I remember many times that I read in the Gospels where they keep trying to get him involved in all these controversies. Should we pay taxes to Caesar? I know you're trying to offend the Pharisees, but you're actually offending us, Jesus. See, I mean, there's lots of times in the Gospels that Jesus said things and people were trying to rope him into their either-or arguments. Let's all fight and be brother against brother, and let's slaughter each other because we have a slight difference of opinion. It's not very helpful. And the reason why this is important to look at, anytime that we're looking at resolving a conflict, as Christians, we have to stop for a second and say, what is my role in all this? And am I helping or hurting the message of Jesus Christ? Am I helping or am I hurting? And I think especially with all the craziness that's going on, we ought to just take a step back for a second. Just take a breath. Hold on. Hold your horses. Just hold on for a second. And work to bring peace, because there's a lot of chaos around us. And honestly, you really don't have to look for something to argue with somebody about. You're going to find it. I mean, everyone's heated about everything right now. In this time, it's important that Christians show people the peace that's found in Jesus, not our own personal high horse and why we're better than someone else. So let's wrap things up, okay? Don't mistake character and preference as having eternal significance, because it doesn't. If somebody has a different character than you, that's not going to keep them out of heaven. If someone has a different preference than you, that's not going to keep them out of heaven. You know what will keep someone out of heaven? Not believing in Jesus. That's it. That's it. When there is someone with a difference of morality, remember that ranting and talking down to them usually won't accomplish much. It really just doesn't help. It's not helpful. You might be right in everything that you say. You might have zingers after zingers. You might really win that argument and smother them in the ground, but it was unhelpful. It had no worth. Your argument had no worth. And I think that's a terrifying idea, to get to God after all the mercy He's shown us and have Him say, you got caught up in battles that just didn't matter. Think about that. If you get to heaven and God says that to you, you got caught up in a bunch of stupid arguments that didn't even matter. Do we honestly think in our arrogance that we completely have full knowledge of everything? I mean, come on. if you want to restore, if you want to bring people to God, if you want to build relationships in the community, you see that sign that we have there on the back there? Bringing people to God and building bridges in the community. If you want to do something like that, you have to start by compromising the things that aren't important and being patient in things that are important. Compromising on the unimportant and being patient with the things that are important. Because you know Rome wasn't built in a day. I actually think I heard a one of the myths was that it was built in 3 days. I think that was one of the myths. Anyways, it's not true either way. It wasn't built in a day, and it's just a process. When you're genuinely interested in solving conflicts, this guy's been a troublemaker for years. He's a no-good druggie. I'm going to have all the words, and I'm just going to shut down every argument. I'm going to have all the answers. I'm going to make him feel real dumb, and I'm going to lead him to Jesus. What? That's wild. Wild, 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 wild. So I guess in summation of all these things, moral of the story being that we are all different. You have to accept that, because that's just the way it is. Lord, we thank you for everything you're doing in us and through us. I just pray you'd help us to love people, people who are different than us, people who think different than us, who grew up in a different background than us, than have different passions than us. Help us to learn that it's not about having a room full of people like us, but instead, it's about telling people about you. God, help us not to get our minds and our eyes off of you. It's all about Jesus. Help us not to get lost. Help us not to forget that. Lord, give us patience. That as we deal with these things, we wouldn't feel like we always have to give our 2 cents. We wouldn't feel like we always have to set people straight. But instead, we'd know that we have to love people and serve them. God, show us ways that we can help those around us and show us ways that we can love those around us. We love you. Amen.